Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kassane, and this is episode 199 for the podcast. For our 200th show next week, we've got something special planned, and you won't want to miss it. Today, though, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Daniel Vitt, CEO of Immunic Therapeutics, to the show. With World MS Day being tomorrow, the 30th of May, this is the perfect moment to focus on multiple sclerosis, a disease that affects nearly 3 million people worldwide and still leaves many patients searching for better options. In today's episode, Daniel shares his own journey into biotechnology, walks us through what life with MS really looks like for patients, and explains the science behind Immunic's most advanced program, Immu-838. We discuss what makes Immunic's oral therapy different from today's treatments, uncover the latest data from the CALLIPER and ENSURE trials, and talk about the future of MS care. So whether you live with MS, care for someone who does, or simply want to understand the latest progress in neurology, I hope you enjoy my discussion with Daniel Vitt. Daniel, welcome to Beyond Biotech.
Yeah, happy to be here today.
Daniel, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background? What drew you into biotech? What drew you to immunology?
Actually trained as a medicinal chemist. It was always my passion to do something good and to translate ideas, technologies, concepts into drugs to treat diseases. And from the very beginning, and it all started at university when I developed a new technology for in silico screening, which today is AI basically. And so I had the opportunity to start my first company in the late 90s. And doing that, that also brought me into the program development, into really real drug design and synthesis. And therefore, I think this is just continuing until today through my whole professional life.
How did you come to join Immunic, and where have you been focusing there in your role as CEO?
Yeah, Immunic is just a logical consequence of my first company, 4SC, where I spent almost 19 years translating the technology into drug development. Because I'm a co-founder of Immunic in the year 2016, and part of the founding team, I was able to buy my favorite molecule from my old company and to bring that into Immunic as the crystallization point of starting the company and now bringing it into phase 3 meanwhile. So that brought me in here, and the role of the CEO was not the first thing I thought about, but clearly, if you're passionate about a drug, you need to make sure it's financed properly. So I took over the role of the CEO, and I think really brought the company from a 4-people startup to a 100 people phase 3 stage biotech company.
For listeners who are new to this 100-person biotech company, give us a quick overview of Immunic. What's the team focused on? What's the mission?
Yeah, and that has once again to do with that molecule. So the mission is really to provide the world, patients in the world, with new therapies, with high unmet medical need and better safety and tolerability profiles. And so specifically focusing on autoimmune diseases and anti-inflammatory diseases. And meanwhile, really narrowing it down to neuroinflammation and neurology, because that seemed to be our sweet spot. We have a molecule in phase 3, so this is what we want to deliver and bring to patients.
It's got to be exciting for you right now to be leading a company that's so deep in the clinic. Tell me, what's your day-to-day like as a CEO for a clinical stage biotech?
I think it's really making sure things are coordinated in the right way. On the one hand, financing. So get the company funded properly, which is always the biggest challenge for every biotech company in the world. On the other hand, to make sure we use the resources in the best possible way. To make sure we have oversight over the clinical programs, we have oversight over the research. So things are coordinated. The regulatory team is working with the clinical team, is working with the research team. So that's the main challenge. And yeah, I like it. I like to do that.
You said you were working a little bit on neurological conditions, and I understand that you work with multiple sclerosis. For people who are listening who may not be really deeply familiar with the disease, can you explain what multiple sclerosis is? What's actually happening inside someone's body?
Yeah, that's something the world's getting more and more information about it. How this is working, I think, in simple words, it's an autoimmune disease where the immune system of the body goes against neurons, basically, in a simplified way. And what the second thing we know since the last maybe 4 or 5 years is that the root cause of that is linked to an infection of Epstein-Barr virus. But it's not really totally completely understood how the progression goes forward. I think the main issue of today is that this continuous attack on the neurons leads to progression of the patient's loss of independence and disability progression. And this is the elephant in the room for MS patients.
What does the day-to-day life of an MS patient typically look like then? Because not all MS is the same, right?
No, it goes in several phases, I would say. The most frequently it's relapsing MS, so the first hints of disease and typically diagnosed in the early part of life, predominantly women affected over men, usually starts in this second, third decade of life. First diagnosis is usually has to do with vision, cognitive function, and walking abilities. So these things are usually first diagnosed, and in relapsing forms of MS that comes in episodes of relapses and remission phases. And then going further over time, and patients are treated on specifically initially on anti-inflammatory drugs to manage the relapse episodes and the inflammation. But going further, I think the challenge is then that patients are progressing. Even if they're on strong immunosuppressive drugs, they're still progressing on the disability scale. And ultimately, most of the patients progress to secondary progressive MS forms, which means that the inflammation is cooling down. There are no more relapses, but still there is a neurodegeneration ongoing, which leads to worsening of the disability there. So this is more or less a simple summary of that. Of course, there's a lot of biology behind it and a lot of other symptoms and diagnostic procedures in place now to fully understand what's going on.
It seems like we're starting to get a grip or a basic understanding of what might be driving it forward then. But what about the treatment landscape? How has that evolved over that last 10 or 15 years?
Well, it all started with the interferons first, and as the first real treatments for MS patients, really slowing down the relapses, cooling down relapse activity, and acute inflammation. And then some oral drugs have been approved, like Aubagio, then Tecfidera, and other drugs like the S1P modulators. So the goal was really initially to stop the relapses because it was thought that they are triggering the disability progression. So today we have around about 15 available drugs in the US. I think remarkable improvements have been linked to first initially the integrin inhibitors, to tisabri namely, but this comes with a safety issue because these kind of drugs can cause reactivation of viruses, and one specifically, John Cunningham virus, which can lead to then PML, which is known to have a higher death rate as a side effect of that. So that's managed today with screening for JC virus, but it's still a challenge. And I think maybe the most important step in the last couple of years was the introduction of anti-CD20 therapy with Ocrevus first, and two more drugs starting on that. Sorry, this was my phone. So the anti-CD20s really were a game changer there because they have been very good in reducing the relapse activity and the inflammation. But still, and I need to say that still, despite having these tools, patients need to switch for either safety reasons or for lack of efficacy reasons. And with drugs like anti-CD20, where you have more or less a complete depletion of B cells, um, you can't treat patients forever on these drugs. So usually you use them when the patients have more inflammation ongoing and they're younger. But with older patients and IgG levels of patients going down, there is a high need for switching those patients off the B cell depletion. And the recovery of B cells can take a year or even two until that is effective. So that defines also the need of new drugs, right?
Is that the biggest challenge then? Is treating a disease where you have so many different options, but none of them are really long-term solutions? None of them are really pushing closer to a cure?
I think yes. It's an individual therapy. The doctor assesses the situation of the patient. It depends really on the how severe the disease is, how quickly patients are progressing, how much inflammation is ongoing. You can see that on MRI scan, which is good. You have biomarkers like NFL. You can measure them to really assess the disease activity. And then I think, yes, and it's always a compromise that the risk benefit is important here. So how to treat these patients, and I think despite having these treatment options available today, there is a huge unmet need. And I think to simplify it, maybe the unmet need is twofold. It's on the one hand having safer and easier to use drugs, specifically in the early disease treatment, safer drugs for switching off immunosuppressive drugs like anti-CD20 therapy. And thirdly, to have drugs which are directly neuroprotective, so which are not just being immunosuppressive, but directly protect neurons from cell death, and therefore going beyond what current drugs can deliver.
So if there's a current unmet need there, I guess it makes us open the door and talk a little bit about what Immunic's doing in MS. Can you walk us through your lead program, IMU-838? What does that do? What's it aimed at?
Yeah, this is a wonderful molecule. And I think it's a good example how drug discovery and development works, because initially it was developed as a safer, more selective inhibitor of a protein called DHODH, which is a known target in MS therapy because Obagio is targeting DHODH. But it turned out that on clinical data, the drug has shown very interesting and unique signs of neuroprotection. And so the scientists in the team, together with some academic collaborators around Daniel Merck from, at that time, Frankfurt University, now in Munich, investigated that in more detail and found that the drug is a potent activator of a nuclear receptor called Nurr1. And that is, and I think, one of those serendipity findings where we are contributing something substantial and changing the way you look on MS, and you can treat the disease, because Nurr1 seemed to be a protein which is involved in direct neuroprotection, maybe for the first time, and not just cooling down inflammation. And I think this makes the molecule unique and excites us because it makes the molecule not just applicable in relapsing forms of MS, and we did not speak about progressive MS yet, but also for treating patients with the progressive forms of multiple sclerosis, primary and secondary progressive MS.
Is it possible to then slow that progression or arrest it altogether?
I think so. And we have read out a study, a phase 2 study, the CALLIPER study, with patients with progressive MS, and the data from that study shows us there is something unique going on. And one example, I don't talk too much about that, but I think I'm excited about seeing in that study a statistically significant increase of confirmed disability improvement. Usually in MS, we talk about worsening of disease. Here, for the first time, and it should also give hope to patients, we talk about CDI, so confirmed disability improvement, meaning there is a substantially higher number of patients which are improving on the disability scale over time on the treatment compared to placebo. And that is something which should give us more hope than just slowing down things or stopping progression. Some patients really benefit from improving on disability.
So that CALLIPER trial, that's a phase 2 trial. You've also got a couple of phase 3 trials, but they're in relapsing MS. Is that right?
Yes, we have two phase 3 studies in relapsing MS, the ENSURE 1 and ENSURE 2 studies. Altogether enrolled 2,221 patients, so a lot of patients went into these studies. But we're also planning to start a phase 3 study in primary progressive MS because we think that the drug deserves development beyond just relapsing MS. And as I said, the unmet need is everywhere. It's in relapsing and in progressive MS.
How deep are you into those phase 3 trials? When are you expecting to read out results there?
Yeah, after really a tough ride to enroll these 2,200 patients, we are now looking at the finish line of the drug. So we hope to be able to read out the study end of this year. So it's pretty close. I'm quite excited about that. Of course, it's a transformative time for the company. And that also was the reason why we were able to raise a substantial financing. Earlier this year in February, we raised 200 million in the first tranche with another potential second tranche of another 200 million to complete the study and also to prepare the launch of the drug and NDA submission and all of these things going further here.
You know, one of the things that stands out, and you mentioned it there, was this potential neuroprotective effect that the molecule has, particularly when it comes to certain viruses like Epstein-Barr. Why does this matter so much for someone who's already got MS?
I think what I said before is important. The mode of action of activating Nurr1 has the ability to slow down disability progression or to even reverse it. And I hope that the studies will reveal the data as secondary readouts of the relapsing MS phase 3 also is focusing on disability progression or improvement. So I hope to be able to show that. And so all these patients which have already a diagnosed MS should benefit from this. But of course, that also would allow to treat patients with progressive MS where there's currently no treatment. If you look on secondary progressive MS, there is no treatment approved at all for this. And this drug could also be used in these indications to treat progression, I think. And in a perfect world, also the definition of the disease would be a little bit modified because at the end, every form of progression is the same and all patients should be treated. If you see an effect in phase 3 studies, it should be applicable to all of these patients, right? So we need to work maybe with the regulators as well to make sure that it's getting to the patients as quickly as possible.
Beyond this asset, that's the lead asset that's in the clinic there, are there other programs in your pipeline that are going to play a role one day or potentially one day for MS treatment?
Yes, I think as I elaborated a little bit on before, we found together with our academic collaborators that Vitt is a protein activator of Nurr1. But of course, Nurr1 is a target which is not only interesting in MS, but also in other neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's disease, potentially ALS, potentially dementia. So we have a full set of new chemical molecules synthesized and in discovery stage, where we want to identify new drugs with specific profiles for these indications. So I'm very optimistic the company will be able to bring a couple of drugs out of this platform in the future to feed the internal pipeline, but also since we may not have endless capital available to enter collaborations with companies at an earlier stage to bring that to the patients.
One of the other things about your lead asset there, and this therapy, it's an oral therapy, right? It's not an injectable. How is that going to change the way that patients are living their lives? Do you expect people to be much more open to using it and have a much higher rate of sticking with the therapy?
But I think the advantage is the patient controls the treatment, and as and maybe every person in the world is used to using tablets because that's convenient. You have them at home and you control that. And I think loss of control is not good for patients. That's the one of the symptoms of MS. But also the treatment and the compliance of the treatment is somehow affected by I want to control it. And since the drug vidofludimus calcium so far has been very nicely tolerated and did not show substantial differences on toxicity, side effects, or safety compared to the placebo treatment, it is something where I expect a high compliance, and it gives the patient the control. Therefore, I think, yes, it's a good step. It's an important step for patients to get oral drugs as a treatment alternative for infusions. It makes the life easier because you don't need to go to an infusion site, and you don't have the hassle there. And also, since the drug is not immunosuppressive in general, it doesn't have the challenges of typical immunosuppressive drugs where you need to closely monitor the immune status and infection risk, which I think makes it easier to use, not only for the doctor, but also for the patient.
You know, a lot of people that I talk to for the show, they want to be the first therapy in a class. They want to be the first in there. You're entering an area where there's already a dozen different therapies approved, but you've still got a little bit of confidence there. You really think that Immunic's MS programs, can set themselves apart from the field, even though there's already these approved treatments?
I believe vidofludimus calcium is a game changer. It's a holistic view of the profile. Outstanding safety and tolerability, I think, make it easy to use for the prescribing physician and for the patient. Oral, easy use for the patient. An antiviral effect, we didn't speak about it, an antiviral effect, which also limits the infection risk. So that makes it pretty unique. Making it an option to switch off immunosuppressive therapies. And then Nurr1 activation as a direct neuroprotective effect, that if I would be an MS patient, that would bring me hope and the ability to prolong the time of my independence as a patient and the focus. That's what I think could be the game-changing potential here for patients.
So, Daniel, tomorrow is the 30th of May. It's World MS Day. You sound pretty optimistic as we're heading into World MS Day. Have you got a message, maybe something you'd share with the MS community as they're thinking about the disease on this weekend? What should they have in mind? Should they be confident?
Absolutely. I think it's our mission is to help these patients to manage their disease and to have a better life. And I think Nurr1 as a target is a transformative research step. And I think the patients deserve our continued effort to develop better drugs for managing the disease, which is also supported by better research to understand what are the factors who contribute to disease origin and also for progression of the disease. And I think also our academic collaborators are doing a great job on, for example, looking on ABV, looking on other processes in the brain, which cell types are involved. I think every week there is a new paper showing some breakthroughs here. And for example, the astrocyte paper last week, where I feel we all together can help to manage MS in a much better way.
So if we're looking ahead then, what do the next couple of years hold for MS treatment, and where does Immunic fit in that future there?
I think our mission is here to make Nurr1 activation the next big thing. And on top of that, there will be new therapies. There will be more next generation things. The more we understand, the better we we can treat it and we can more selectively treat it. So to give patients options which are not adding risk to their lives, which are not, for example, adding new immunosuppression to their lives. I think we are at a very important point in that world. After the first wave, immunosuppressive drugs to treat relapses, now we are focusing on disability progression and quality of life.
So you've got your phase 3 trials, which are hoping to get the readout towards the end of the year, by the end of the year. What other milestones should we be looking for when it comes to Immunic for the rest of this year?
But just we are fully focusing on getting the trials done and preparing the submission to the regulatory bodies. So this is going forward. We also strengthening the team. We are reaching out to treating physicians to make sure they understand the mode of action because it's new, and they understand that game-changing potential of the drug. So there's a lot of things going on here in the company, strengthening the management team. Just recently, we added a new chief medical officer with a really year-long experience in the field of multiple sclerosis, who brought already a couple of MS drugs to the market, just to make sure we do the best we can to make it a success.
Finally, for people listening who want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing and they want to stay connected to your work, where can they find out more information about you?
Of course, on our homepage, imux.com, and also on social media. I think our team works with media on making sure we really talk about it. We educate people about what we are doing and to see what's going on. We are very transparent usually on what we're doing as far as it's possible in this market.
Daniel, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today on Beyond Biotech.
Thank you, Dylan.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.